Welcome to the deep dive. So, this is where we take your source material, maybe articles, reports, whatever notes you've pulled together, and we really dig into it.
Right, pull out the key stuff, the core message.
Exactly. The goal is to get you those core insights fast, so you don't have to wade through pages and pages yourself. Today, we're looking at some excerpts you sent over. The title is Proactive Security, a Strategic Imperative. I mean, that title alone tells you something, doesn't it?
It really does. Sets a very clear tone, a strong stance on how we should think about security, about preparedness.
And the source zeroes in on this key difference, right? Being proactive versus, well, just reacting, especially when it comes to safety, security roles, maybe even firearms preparedness in certain contexts.
Precisely, that's the heart of it.
So our mission here is to unpack why. Why does this source argue so forcefully that waiting for a crisis is basically a massive gamble?
A dangerous one.
Yeah. And what are the benefits it lays out for taking those deliberate steps before things go wrong? Why frame it as a strategic imperative? What's behind that urgency?
Well, the source jumps right in, say that reacting, just waiting. It's not just inefficient anymore. In today's world, it argues, it's fundamentally insufficient, maybe even dangerous.
Okay, let's really get into that core argument. The source says, flat out, that in what it calls today's volatile landscape, reacting is, quote, no longer a viable strategy. That's a strong statement.
It is, and it's based on what the source apparently sees repeatedly. Individuals, businesses, even institutions, they wait. They delay investing in crucial training, in security systems, until after something bad happens.
And the picture it paints of what happens then, it sounds pretty grim. Lives endangered, reputations shredded, resources poured out in a frantic last-ditch effort.
It describes this specific pattern. The source is Valortech, by the way, a pattern of complacency first, then when a threat hits, chaos, and then the frantic call for help.
But the damage is already done by then.
That's the critical point the source makes. Often the most significant harm, the stuff you can't undo, has already happened.
Complacency followed by chaos. That's play. That's a powerful phrase. What exactly does the source mean by this volatile landscape? Why is the speed of things escalating, suddenly so critical that reacting isn't good enough?
Well, what's really striking is how the source ties reaction directly to damage you can't reverse. Think of volatile landscape as, well, an environment where threats pop up unexpectedly. Could be anywhere. And they can escalate incredibly fast.
Okay.
So if your whole plan hinges on starting to act after you realize something's wrong, the time it takes you to see it, figure it out, get moving, the source implies that window is often longer than the time it takes for serious harm to occur.
So you're inherently behind the curve.
Exactly. You're always playing catch-up. And in a world where threats move that fast, the source says that's just not a winning strategy anymore.
Makes sense. You can't afford to be reacting when the threat's already unfolded. And it doesn't just say reacting is bad. It gets specific about the cost, the high cost of waiting, it calls it. And it's clear these aren't just, financial costs.
Not at all. It details several hidden costs. And these are deep, things you often can't fully recover from.
The first one it lists. That one hits hard, the human cost. Lives that, quoting here, could have been protected with better training. That just outweighs everything else.
It absolutely does. But then it also outlines the operational hits, the reputational damage. It mentions lost business continuity, specifically citing weeks of operational downtime.
Weeks? For a single incident. Wow. In today's world, that could finish some businesses.
It could. And beyond that downtime, the source brings up legal liability. Civil litigation, potentially, if an incident was preventable. And then, crucially, there's the loss of public trust.
Trust.
Yeah, it describes trust as, hard-earned and quickly lost, suggesting it's one of the first things to go when a crisis isn't prevented or handled well.
And to make this real, the source gives an example, right? A tech firm in Florida.
Yes, a mid-sized one. A clear case study in reactivity, according to the source. It describes a workplace violence incident there.
Okay, and what happened after? The source says the leadership then.
Well,
invested heavily.
Exactly. Then they invested heavily. Active shooter drills, better surveillance, firearms training, the works.
But the timing is key here.
Precisely. The source hammers this point. These critical changes only came after 2 employees were harmed and the media storm hit.
After the damage. And the source's conclusion on that case. It says the company's reputation took a hit, no insurance policy could reverse. That hidden cost of trust you mentioned, it sounds like it really sticks. Lingers long after the event itself.
Mm-hmm. And if you connect that specific story back to the source's main argument, these costs, tangible and intangible, they really highlight the difference between what the source calls the cost of prevention investing beforehand versus that much, much higher cost of recovery, or maybe even cost of failure, really.
Right. Prevention as an investment versus reaction as basically paying for damages.
That's how the source frames it. And you can't fully pay your way out once the real damage, especially to trust or life, is done.
So, if reacting is so costly and unpredictable, what's the alternative the source pushes? It talks about proactive security as a strategic advantage.
Right. This is where it lays out the solution, shifting deliberately from just responding to threats to actively mitigating them beforehand.
And how does it define being proactive? Seems straightforward.
It is. Taking intentional preventive steps before a potential threat becomes a reality. Simple concept, but requires effort.
And it lists specific actions, right? What does that look like in practice?
Well, things like doing thorough risk assessments, vulnerability analyses, which basically means, actively looking for your own weaknesses, your blind spots, before someone else finds them and exploits them.
Makes sense. It also mentioned implementing firearms training.
Yes, where appropriate, for licensed professionals, security personnel, and also setting up realistic training scenarios, crisis response drills so people actually know what to do under that kind of extreme pressure.
And it's not just about the security team, is it? It mentioned educating staff.
Absolutely crucial point. Educating all staff.
Yeah.
Skills like de-escalation, how to recognize potential threats early on, making good decisions when things are stressful. It's a much broader approach than just, cameras and locks.
So it's about building capability across the board. And the outcome, if you do this, the source says the team, they don't freeze up.
Exactly. They act with clarity and precision is the phrase used. They don't just react in fear.
And this is where the source says something really interesting about professionalism.
Yes, a very impactful statement. It reframes the whole thing. A proactive approach is not paranoia. It's professionalism.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's pushing back directly against the idea that being prepared means you're just scared or overly worried.
Right. It positions readiness not as fear-based, but as a fundamental standard. Like, this is what responsible professional leadership looks like. It sends a message, quoting the source again, "We value life and we're prepared to protect it."
That completely shifts the motivation, doesn't it? It's not spending money because you're afraid. It's investing because you value safety and well-being. It becomes a positive attribute.
Precisely. It turns security from feeling like a necessary burden into something that actually builds confidence, an asset.
The source then gives another example, focusing on houses of worship, which sadly have become targets.
Yes, it points out a common situation. Many rely on very dedicated volunteers, but often they lack formal training. Or maybe the protocols are just outdated.
And for one specific church in Florida, the trigger for change wasn't something happening to them directly.
Correct. It was a security breach at a nearby congregation during a service. The source notes no one was hurt, thankfully, but it served as a major wake-up call.
That idea of a wake-up call is interesting. It shows you don't necessarily need to suffer the trauma yourself to be motivated to act, learning from someone else's close call.
It can be a powerful motivator.
Right.
And it was for this church, according to the source.
So what did they do? After this nearby incident spooked them.
The source says they acted quickly. Within weeks, they brought in Valor Tech, did a full vulnerability audit, identified their specific weak points, and then, crucially, developed a custom training program for their security volunteers.
And this wasn't just basic stuff.
No, the source specifies firearm safety, situational awareness, which is huge, recognizing trouble early, and emergency evacuation protocols, really tailored to their needs and their team.
A comprehensive approach. And the result? How are things there now, according to the source?
The source says they operate with confidence. They feel prepared for the worst, which allows them to actually focus on their main mission, serving the community in peace. It's presented as the direct payoff for being proactive.
That's a stark contrast to the tech firm example, isn't it? Where the changes only came after harm, reacting after injury versus acting after a warning sign. The source really uses these stories to drive home the difference.
It does. And that church example brings up a challenging question, especially given the source's point about complacency being common. How do organizations, or even individuals, realistically recognize their own vulnerabilities before a direct hit? before that wake-up call.
Yeah, the source implies it's hard to see your own blind spots when you're living in them day to day.
Complacency feels comfortable, right?
Until
Until it isn't.
maybe that outside perspective is key, like the church getting the audit. Someone objective looking for risks you might just overlook because you're used to them.
That seems to be what the source suggests, yes. An objective assessment.
The source also stresses that this whole conversation, it's not just about guns.
Right. That's an important clarification it makes. It broadens the idea of true readiness.
So what is true readiness then, according to this?
It's defined as encompassing mindset, communication, and coordinated response under pressure. It's about the people, the planning, the teamwork, not just the hardware.
Okay. So the tools matter, but they're part of a bigger picture.
Exactly. And the source draws a very sharp distinction here. It says something like, being armed without proper training is a liability.
Or liability. Wow. So the tool itself isn't enough. It could even be negative without the skill behind it?
That's the implication. But on the other hand, it says being trained and prepared, even if unarmed, is a powerful asset.
That really shifts the focus. It's the capability, the training, the ability to function effectively when things go sideways. That's the primary asset, whether a firearm is involved in someone's specific role or not.
It reinforces that whole holistic approach the source advocates. Yes, skills and maybe tools, but grounded in assessment, planning, mindset, coordination.
Okay, so bringing it all together, the source's conclusion has this real sense of urgency, doesn't it?
Definitely. It ends with a very clear statement. Crises don't announce themselves, they erupt.
Yeah.
No warnings, no scheduled appointments for disaster.
And it puts the responsibilities squarely on leaders. Business leaders, security heads, school principals, pastors, anyone in charge of a group. The source says they are responsible for readiness.
It basically boils the whole thing down to one core choice. Be proactive or be forced to react. There's no middle ground presented.
And it does mention, just as information from the source, that training programs are available for professionals, institutions, citizens choosing that proactive path. It lists examples: advanced pistol defense, active threat management, presented as concrete steps people can take.
Right. Presented as tools by the source to build those capabilities, not just to survive, but potentially to manage a crisis effectively, maybe even lead others through it.
And that final line the source uses, it really sticks with you. Because when seconds count, the time to train is not tomorrow, it's today.
It's a powerful call to action. Ties everything together, the stakes, the consequences, the need for immediate commitment to preparedness.
So if we pull back and look at the whole deep dive into your source material, the core message is this really stark contrast the source paints, waiting to react. It's presented as this incredibly costly gamble, irreversible consequences potentially, human life, reputation, resources, all on the line. Whereas choosing to be proactive, the source frames that not just as better, but as essential, a strategic imperative, a mark of professionalism, leading to clarity, decisiveness, confidence when facing threats.
And by digging into the source like this, you really get why the author argues preparedness isn't just optional or fear-driven. It's positioned as this fundamental choice about responsibility and values. So as we wrap this up, here's maybe something to think about, building on what the source laid out. It heavily emphasizes that complacency is a huge barrier. People just don't act until they have to. Given that, and given how hard it seems to be for organizations, or even us as individuals, to see our own vulnerabilities from the inside, what are some realistic first steps someone could actually take to get an honest look at their current readiness, especially if they haven't had that big wake-up call yet? How do you break through that complacency barrier?
That's a really critical question. How do you overcome that internal inertia? That might just be the first and maybe the toughest step toward embracing the kind of proactive mindset this source is advocating for. Definitely something to consider. Thank you for bringing the source material to us today. It's given us, and hopefully you, a lot to think about